Order. Welcome to the Wednesday, December 14, 2022 electronic meeting of the Ann Arbor Design Review Board. This meeting is held electronically to protect public health and safety due to the COVID-19 virus and to comply with the orders issued by the Governor, the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, and the Washington County Health Department. We intend to conduct this meeting similar to an in-person meeting. However, please be patient if there are technical issues, like my ability to read from a screen. Public comment will be via telephone only. To speak during any of the public comment opportunities, please call 877-852-5247 or 888-788-0099 and enter meeting ID 974-6174-9412. And I think CTN puts that up on the screen for people, don't they, Courtney?
I believe so. I'm not 100% certain though.
All right. Well, I'll repeat it again when it's time. I'll repeat those numbers again when it's time for public comment. This information is also available on the published agenda in the public notices section of the city website and on the broadcast of this meeting on CTN channel 16, AT&T channel 99, and online at www.a2gov.org/watch CTN. The Design Review Board is a volunteer resident board appointed by the mayor and confirmed by city council. The purpose of the Design Review Board is to foster excellence in the design of Ann Arbor's built environment and to advise applicants on how a project can meet the spirit and intent of the downtown design guidelines. First, the applicant will have 10 minutes to present their proposed project to the Design Review Board. Then the Design Review Board will hold a discussion on the design of the project. And then following the presentation discussion, members of the public are permitted to comment for up to 3 minutes. And with that, if Jeff, you can call roll.
Yep. Board Member Singleton.
Present.
Member Mitchell.
Here.
Member Perkins.
Here.
5 p.m.
Member Ramson.
Here.
John Kotarski.
Here.
Member Burns. Member Cooper. Member Kinley. You have a quorum.
Thank you. First order of business then is approval of our agenda. If everybody's had a chance to look it over, if I could have a motion.
Motion.
And a second.
I'll second.
Moved by Lori, seconded by Dick. Any further discussion about our agenda? All those in favor signify by saying aye. And raise your hand.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Agenda is approved. And then on to approval of the minutes of the, looks like we're approving minutes from the July 13, 2022 Design Review Board meeting, not the October meeting.
I'm sorry, that's incorrect. That's a typo. It's the October 12th
Okay.
meeting.
Okay. Which I wasn't at. So for those of you who have had a chance to read them, if I could have a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Second, somebody.
I think Bill seconded.
Okay, moved by Lori and seconded by Bill. All those, any further discussion about the minutes? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Approve. The minutes for the October meeting are approved. And then looks like our first item of regular business is DR 22-2008, 350 South Fifth Avenue. Do we have somebody? Do we have the petitioner first present, or does staff give their review first?
The petitioner is going to present first. They'll have up to 10 minutes. they'll be able to share their screen and describe the project. After that, members of the board can provide comment, and at the very end, staff will offer a few nuggets of wisdom.
And
All right, then I guess-
I would like to recuse myself from the discussion as an employee of Smith Group who will be presenting today.
All right, thank you, Lori. So if the petitioner can take the opportunity to fill us in on their project.
I think Mr. Kincaid was going to share his screen, if I'm not mistaken. There we go.
I'm still working on promoting panelists.
Okay. Yeah, this is Dan Kincaid. It should be up. Do you all see it?
Yep,
Okay.
we do.
And my colleagues will be stepping in here to start it up.
Great.
Yeah, this is Michael Johnson here. Are we ready to go? Or are we waiting on folks still?
I believe we're good to start.
Perfect. Well, so I'm Michael Johnson. I lead our urban design team that cuts across our Detroit and Ann Arbor office from Smith Group. Lindsay and I are here in Ann Arbor today, and excited to spend a few minutes with you all today, presenting you some of the updates on the 350 South 5th project. Certainly a continuation of the process that was a community-driven process, and many of you partook in various iterations of the conversations that we've had today. So keep rolling through the slides, Dan.
Mm-hmm.
Just a quick snippet of the kind of where we are. Next slide. I wanted to just really emphasize as we kind of get into this presentation that obviously an important piece on behalf of the Housing Commission, the city, and various departments of a larger plan to build affordable housing units in Ann Arbor and in downtown. As part of mitigating one of what we think, and many of you know, is one of our important existential crises in the city. Next slide. As I alluded to earlier, the information you'll see today is very much in line with and a continuation of the area plan and the PUD process that was presented to you all in this body and unanimously approved by City Council in April. Next slide. And then just real quickly as context, and we're not going to get into all the details here, but I think many of you know and are aware of that this is part of a larger 4-year effort to change the narrative around affordable housing and mixed-use development in downtown. But also, I think we want to emphasize a great example of what's possible when the community, city staff, the Housing Commission, the DDA, the Transit Authority, OSI, and others collaborate to achieve outcomes that we haven't been able to achieve in our downtown before. So with that as a background, I'll pass it over to my teammates to kind of get into the details today.
Hi everybody, I'm Lindsay. I'm a landscape architect group.
We're having trouble hearing Lindsay.
Oh, can you hear me okay?
A little better.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I'll speak up really loudly. So here we have just some project stats. Things to note here. We've got 2 18-story towers. The west building has 95 affordable units in it, and the east building has approximately 200, 20% of which will be affordable. The other is market rate. I'm going to flip to the next slide. I think, as Ann Arbor residents, we're all pretty familiar with the site, formerly known as the Old Y Lot. I think, currently it's obviously a parking lot and feels pretty underutilized as its current use, especially given its proximity to the transit center, the library, and Main Street. Flip to the next slide. So, here's the surrounding context. I think the design team has been taking into account the surrounding context as well as the residential units to the south that you can see here in letters D and E. Next slide. And then here you can see, the neighboring parking structure, letter G, and then H is the new high-rise building, pretty much kitty corner to the site at Main and William. You can go to the next slide, please. So I'm going to spend some time here on the site plan, and this is, we've obviously been working since we submitted our application at the deadline a month ago, and so this is an updated site plan than what you have all seen in your packet. I'll be going over it briefly, but happy to get into more detail and discussion. But here you can see the first floor shaded in dark blue. There's a white dashed line is the building or a canopy overhead. And then you can see the site's pretty much divided into halves. We've got the streetscape first floor of the building, really trying to activate this corner between 4th and 5th Avenues. We have pretty standard streetscape in terms of trees and curbed planters and bike parking. Residents will be entering the building off of 5th Avenue. I don't know if, Dan, you can point to the entries. There's a doorway there, and then to the other tower along East William Street. And then the retail faces along William Street, and the entry to that will likely be along William Street, but to be determined. So moving north on the site, you can see there's, I believe it's like a 15-foot, maybe 18-foot wide service lane and egress. So this will be used for waste collection and deliveries, all back of house for the building. And then moving to the other half of the site, we have a unique use where we're trying to accommodate AAA TA operations, and we want to make this feel very deliberately designed and separate, so that ridership doesn't feel like they're waiting for buses at the back of a high rise. And so we've been very careful about how we're designing this, and this is where you'll see most of the updates in your design packet. Compared to this slide here. We've been working very closely with AAA TA on the design of this, and hearing from them, we really want to be careful about designing these two sites so that the bus platforms feel as one, and riders can easily hop off a bus coming through our site, transfer to a bus on 4th Avenue or just north of the transit center. And so we've provided some connections via steps, a ramp, and then to the far left side of this plan, we have a plaza where the grades kind of flatten out, and we can do some trees and grates and benches, but we want to keep it feeling like a plaza so that there's as much flow through a pedestrian activity as possible. I think I'll keep it brief on this site because we know we're short on time. So I will hand it to the architecture team.
Great. Thank you very much, Lindsay. And thanks again to all of you for coming on the call with us this afternoon. What we want to do now is transition into a series of views to share with you the look and feel of the building. We know you've had a chance to look at this relatively closely. We want to, first of all, though, set this in context. So what we're looking at right now is a perspective that's looking northwest. You see on the right side, the 18-story East Tower, which was mentioned in market rate and mixed income here, about 200 units. And then over to the left, you can see the fully affordable tower at 17 stories, split by a vertical strike of the stairway here. The notable things here that we want folks to understand is as we set up the overall project to deliver on the really important mission and vision here to have affordable housing and housing in general within Ann Arbor, is to begin to set the stage to align with the context. So while we're delivering a range of units here, we're also paying close attention to the adjacencies, including a 2-story podium that's stepping down at 4th and 5th along William, aligning the height with the adjacent library that you can see here, to the right with the brick masonry, the existing homes also to the south, paying close attention again to the materiality there, and then activating the ground plane with active retail and resident lobbies to really bring life into this space where we know today exists a parking lot. We also want to make sure that we're framing the entry way into the Blake Transit Center for AAA TA here, which you can see on the right side of the base of the building, and to bring that into a covered space to house that and provide a great rider experience here. Again, providing dignity and access to riders who really need it. So this is a great illustration of the impact we think the project can have and the way that it can align with the existing context. So here's a reverse view for you, actually looking now southwest. And in this case now, the Blake Transit Center is in the foreground. And you can see the relationship between it then and the new proposed building. You can also see that canopy element that comes across, framing that entry point for buses and riders, and really creating a strong relationship between the brick masonry podium that's outlined on the new building and the library across the street, as well as the houses to the south there.
1 minute remaining.
Okay, so we'll speed through these.
Okay.
First floor plan, I think, was well covered. The purple's retail, yellow are lobbies. Let's move on. And second floor is an amenity level. The only interesting fact here is the generators in the left-hand corner, and that's due to site constraints. We have that inside the building. The third floor is when the units start to be placed. So the green here is representing the units, and the yellow is an amenity space for the west tower. And there's a small amenity space for the east tower. But the towers are actually separate so that they can function independently. Next. And then 4 through 16, this is your typical arrangement of dwelling units. We've got 7 units per floor on the fourth, per floor for the west tower, and we've got 13 per floor for the east tower. That will give us 95 units in the west tower and 199 units in the east tower, with 152 one bedroom and 47 2 bedroom. All of the units in the west tower will be 1 bedroom, and that allows us for a total of 135 affordable units.
Mm-hmm.
Back to you, Dan.
Great, and we'll give you, to close here, a few quick glimpses of the project. Again, down on William, looking toward the west, again, seeing the podium configuration, the relationship to the street and streetscape, kind of coming back on the other side toward the north, looking back over the Blake into the building, again, with the context beyond. And then a close-up here on the facade, looking at the southwest corner here into the affordable tower with really nice amenity at that top level of the third floor. And a representation here of some of the materials that we're considering: natural materials, warm colors, warm tones, and materials that will provide us depth in the facade, both for relief and texture, but also for sun shading on the south facade. You can see how some of that kind of forms up here with the adjacent balcony space facing onto William. And then to close out, one higher level outdoor terrace at the top of the west tower, as you can see from the top here. So we will close there, and would love to jump into discussion.
Thank you.
All right, thank you for that. I guess anybody that wants to comment from the board, please feel free to jump in. I have some comments from Tamara that I will share. Then I will share those now. And I happen to share the same concern. It's not really a concern, but Tamara's comment was that we keep hearing this being referred to as 2 towers, and they don't really read that way. When we saw this project a couple of years ago, I believe the west end of the building, that tower was 13 stories, and the section of the market rate housing was higher. And what we have now, other than being separated by the stair tower and some changes in materials, it doesn't really read as 2 towers. And I'm not sure if that's really important or not, but it from a massing standpoint and from an architectural standpoint, it's not reading as 2 towers. That was her comment, and I happen to agree with it. Other than that, she is very supportive of the project, likes the idea that it's happening on this site, the affordable housing component. and also the interaction with the transit center. Those are all positive things for the community. So she's very supportive of the project. Dick, go ahead.
Hi, Jeff. I see Jennifer Hall has joined us, and I was curious if you could explain, Jennifer, is the difference between the West Tower and the East Tower both ownership and management and the type of unit, or all three? Will a private developer own the East Tower?
Ownership, yes, separate, two different ownership entities. Property management to be determined how that would be worked out. And the tenants, it'd be a different legal entities, and the tenant population would be different, and the way it's financed would be different. So they'd definitely be, I guess, maybe not from the architectural perspective, but from all the other perspectives, we're designing it to be a two different towers with it actually has when you look at the hallways and it looks like they're connected, they're actually separated by doors that allows them to share a freight elevator to move large items up and down. But other than that, they'll function completely separate from each other. They each have their own waste management. They have their own separate elevators. They have their own separate property management staff, services, whatever's on each site. That part of it will be completely different from each other.
So you're going through the planning process now, and then we'll solicit proposals from developers for these towers. Do I have that right?
Yeah, we originally planned on going from PUD and supplemental regs to soliciting a developer to work with to get through site plan process. And as we were literally writing the RFP and thinking about the project, we knew there were so many public purposes that we wanted to accomplish, that we really wanted to make sure we designed those into the project, particularly related to working with the AAATA, working towards the city's A230 goals, working on our affordability goals and how we design the building. And so it felt like we should make those kinds of decisions first, and then we'd have a RFP that we could present out to the private sector to get us through the financing and development component that answered a lot of questions, didn't have, questions that were still uncertain as a respondent to an RFP, and mitigated that risk as well. And so that's why we ended up switching the order of the way we're approaching it.
Thank you. I understand. So the goal is to get the developers something that is as close to shovel ready as possible without needing them to go through the planning process, but they won't be at the table for the planning process. Okay. Thanks.
Will the developers then be bound to this design, these materials, so to speak? I mean, how bringing in a private developer that you haven't identified, how will what we're looking at today translate into what they build?
I was going to let my architectural team talk about that. I think that the exterior of what we're looking at shouldn't change unless we had to come back and ask for an actual change that gets approved by the planning commissioner, whichever body would have to approve that. What we've left some flexibility in is, although we've designed the interior, they will have some more flexibility on the interior of the East Tower than on the West Tower. That's all affordable. Did I describe that right, Dan?
Yep. Yeah. And I would just add by saying, I think the way we've tried to approach this from a design perspective, and your question is right on point. It highlights an important factor in this process. What we're trying to do is make sure as we move through the design process, and particularly lead up to schematic design, that we can define the shape and form and materiality of the building, its performance characteristics, so that there can be a better understanding of overall cost, both capital and operating going forward, and the ways in which the project can meet some of the larger objectives of the plan unit development and supplemental regulations that were laid out in the start of the effort. And so we can use those as real guidelines for us going forward to make sure people, can anticipate what's going to come out of it, but also really important that we hit the market in a good way so people have a good frame of reference around what we're trying to achieve with it.
We have another person on our team that hasn't been promoted. If you could promote Darren McKinnon as well. Just in case we need him to respond.
There it is.
Thank you very much.
Comments from other design board members?
I think Bill had his hand up. Bill?
I did. I have a couple physical questions. One with the buses under a canopy. I assume until the buses are electrified, you still have a fair amount of exhaust. How is that handled? How is that taken into account that there'll be quite a bit of exhaust trapped under that canopy coming up and over? How have you addressed that if it is a matter of concern?
Yeah, that's a great question, and maybe I'll jump in first and my colleagues can come in as well. I think the big objective for us, of course, is to make sure that there's a really good ridership experience here. The canopy we think can help support that, especially during inclement weather. But at the same time, as you say, before the fleet can fully change over to electrified, we do want to make sure that we're thinking through microclimate and ways the prevailing winds flow through. And so actually during the PUD process, we did have conversations and did do modeling on that to understand where peak winds are coming through, where low winds are coming through, both seasonally and at different times of day. And so we've started to map that out here. What we want to do is also look at what we've done most recently, including the canopy, and model that again to better understand what's happening down there, and to see if there's any supplemental wind movement that we need to provide in that location.
Are there service doors on the back side of the first floor of the building? Are there entries? Certainly not pedestrian entries, I assume, but are there service entries that I'm just thinking if there is a microclimate there, it could be a pretty trapped amount that could come rushing in if there were service vehicles bringing food in or whatever on that side.
Right. See, I can speak to that, Sandy.
There's a like waste collection, and there's loading, and there's exit doors for the stairs. So that would really be in one direction. But we've added exhaust directly for the waste and loading in order to make sure that can be, the air exchange can be more than what you might typically have, I guess is what I want to say. But they've been working on that to include those. So the plans actually show that in the packet you have, is that on the upper floors, you'll see that there's an exhaust shaft next to each trash chute to help exhaust those spaces.
Thank you. One other question, just curiosity. Are you thinking of using mass timber construction?
No.
That'll be allowed up to 18 stories.
The on-center spacing for wood construction would really play havoc with our plans at this time and would become an impossibility for the bus lanes to get through. So we weren't able to make that one a win.
I'm excited about the whole concept from what I've seen. So just curiosity.
Yes.
Thank you.
We're with you.
I've got a question. It's a little confusing. I can't quite tell what's happening on top of the canopy where it's not covered by the towers. And some of the north view and some of the other views, you get a sense that there's a railing around it. And there's a covered portion that's maybe related to the units, but is the whole canopy treated as a roof deck, or is it, some of it's just not finished?
Yeah, I think in the design process, that's something that we're moving through right now. As it stands, we're looking at that to be basically a ballasted roof or a green roof potentially there. That we have thought about that as a potential amenity, but we're kind of working through that. It's a kind of main point that we're reviewing right now in the design process.
I assume that you've at least considered maybe skylights. They'd have to be fairly large to be effective, but skylights is a possibility to get some direct light down into the.
We have actually, and with our lighting group and on our design team, we've looked closely at large scale roof monitors that could bring light through, and we're trying to evaluate how that works with the structure overall and what amount of light we could bring down. It's notable that with or without the canopy, this side of the building is the north face,
Right.
and so it's perpetually shaded in a way. So we're trying to kind of figure out what that ambient light delivery would be on the ground.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question about this. Doesn't really relate to the design of this building. But I guess wondering kind of where does AATA stand in all of this? I mean, in effect, the city is giving a huge gift to the transit component of this town by allowing them access into the site and so forth. And I know we talked about it 2 years ago in the meeting about, and Dick brought this up in detail, was a way to make the transit center then relate to the lanes that we're providing for the buses here. And I'm not seeing that being addressed in any, and I know you're not designing their building for them, but where do they stand in participating with this, basically this gift that's being given to them?
Hey, Jeff, I mean, I can chime in here from a design perspective, and I think Jennifer can chime in from more of the, kind of the other things if we need to. But from a pure design perspective, the AAATA has been and continues to participate in our weekly design meetings and has been a key member of the design coordination here to make sure that both, the adequate space for bus and pedestrians in that area is in consideration. As you can imagine, still very much in progress and a lot of questions. I think Lindsay did a great job of kind of laying out, what we hope to achieve, knowing that partnership is going to have to continue on both sites and through a DTE easement. And so I think I wanted to just kind of raise all of those things that are, continually we'll have to push on to achieve some of the goals that I, laid out at the beginning. The other point too is this is also happening in parallel with a redesign for Fourth, right, which is a DDA driven project. Again, in totality, kind of reimagining the complete transit experience at the downtown station. So we're very much coordinating all those efforts. You saw kind of the in progress notion of those today, but they have very much been active participants in our meetings today.
I guess I'd just like to add that I like to joke, but it's true that it's a public partnership. So we got the City of Ann Arbor, the Ann Arbor Housing Commission, the DDA, and the AAATA. So that was also a reason why we want all of us in the room trying to figure out how this will work. It's very complicated and complex, as you can imagine. The first floor in particular.
Yeah.
Related to that, I noticed that one of the city objectives was to increase the number of bus spaces. And I know we're losing some on Fourth. There are 2 or 3 on Fourth, and we're losing the air ride on Fifth. And it looks like the most recent site plan Lindsay talked about shows 3 new spaces. So is it a net loss, or is it a wash, or are we gaining something?
I mean, let me chime in first, and you
Yeah,
can
go
get
ahead.
into the details. I mean, I think, Dick, we have we've added 4 off-street bus parking spaces, which we're looking at as transplanting existing on-street spaces to off-street spaces. So that's a net neutral number of spaces, but as we're understanding from the AAATA, still very important for them to complete that island and the notion of a double-sided transit station for their ability to think about transfers in different ways. When then added to new plans for Fourth, there's opportunities to add significant bus staging areas, and so again, this project specifically would be neutral from a number of spaces, but I think we need to continue to think about this as a continuation, including Fourth redesign.
I really like the new mini plaza between Blake and the new drop-off stations. That's a good idea. The connection between the building and the new bus spaces to the south is difficult because all of the non-window spaces in Blake are on that south side, the bathrooms and the offices. And so there isn't a good visual connection. So moving it around the west side of the building makes sense. And I like that.
Gary, I think if you're talking, you're muted.
I did. I was just asking if you could just clarify where the different materials are being used. I'm not sure where there's terracotta versus concrete, but the brick is obvious. So
Yeah, sure. Let me grab a screen real quick. Second. Okay, can you see that?
Floor plan.
Floor plan, yep. So why don't we come around here really quickly on the materials? As we're moving through the design process, so things are still in flux for us. A couple of things to highlight. One is the wraparound brick masonry that we're showing here, both a darker charcoal tone and a lighter one that matches the kind of adjacent contextual brick that comes over and up on the west tower, and then on the east tower, where we have the design, it kind of opens up a little bit more. This is where we're introducing a stronger kind of framing element in here. We're looking at a range of different components right now, everything from potentially a precast concrete element to a machine generated metal covering here, or something that starts to move toward terracotta. Overall, we're conscious also of weight here. We're trying to lose a little bit of weight in the process, if you will, to make sure we're also not beefing up all the structure we need, which also adds a lot of embodied carbon in the project. And so we're weighing all those options back and forth, thinking through those materials, their performance overall, and particularly when we design this component here, that we start to think about speed to installation, so that when we do this, the project can move quickly and we minimize the total dimension of construction time to limit the disruptions on site. And that's something we're really keen to think through, so that the elements that you see maybe pre-combined before going on, and then allowing us to kind of move around the building relatively rapidly.
On that, Dan, if you could talk about the windows.
Mm-hmm.
They look to be floor to ceiling. Is that just a starting point, or is that really part of the design?
It is part of the design. We don't come all the way down to the floor. It's just shy of that. We have an edge on that. But we wanted to kind of consider this piece a kind of more open facade. We're looking through it again, the depth of our facade, to make sure we can find ways to mitigate solar gain here, while also just really providing those big open views. We're also, what we do here too is, you can see some of the infill panel that's present there. it shifts around to give some dynamism to the facade, but it also helps us end partitions so that where we have demising walls between units, or you have partitions on a, say, a 1-bedroom unit, they can dead end into that rather than hitting the glass, so that we can keep that nice open kind of glazed look while then balancing it with brick masonry or terracotta infill.
I for one like the essentially floor to ceiling windows, and I like the inset brick panels, which give you some variety. And you got an awful lot of south facing
Yeah.
facade to deal with, and shading might be an issue at some point.
Yeah, it's a great point. It's something we're really conscious of and working really closely with our lighting designers and our engineers to make sure that we're creating something that's viable here while also not kind of creating an overbearing facade. It's a great point.
But Dan, you talk about light shelves in the narrative and some shading devices and rain screen, and you probably haven't gotten to the detail enough, but the detailed perspectives don't show any of those. And I share Gary's concern that there's a lot of south-facing glass, and the heat gain is going to be pretty difficult.
Yeah, we are, like I said, we are studying that right now, and at this stage of the design, we know we're going to have to make some moves along the way, but we are trying to think that through, and to really determine what those kind of divisional members you see in the facade, where they're positioned as outboard, so we can get more depth there. And in our cross sections, we're studying that right now and thinking through, okay, if we have the infill piece that's on those panels, we can run a rain screen there that can stand back. We can have the frame kind of stand proud of that, and particularly the horizontal components, and actually make them so they're not symmetrical in the bevel, but actually the bevel is deeper on the top, giving us a greater projection outward. And we're studying those angles right now, as well as even potential spandrel members that could be closer to the floor elevation, so that where we may have more sunlight coming in there, we can actually block it there, which, to the points that have been made here, would minimize some of the visible see-through transparent glazing that would be present.
One of the comments that Tamara passed along that just occurred to me is the potential to turn that stair tower into something that is more of a glass element. Maybe using that as a better way to separate the so-called two towers was a thought that she had.
It's a great point, and it's really one of the reasons we have this feature here. If you can see my cursor, it provides a nice kind of striking line between the two towers themselves. And in that division, it also kind of helps us step out to that frontage at the zero lot line and roll up. Honestly, what we've talked about a couple times is, is there an art component to this? Is it an expanded mural? Is it something that may even incorporate photovoltaics on it? Where those are things that are in play at we would look at in any design process. So it is fluid, but we do like the element itself as a kind of component that breaks up that facade and obviously handles important egress for us, because it's noteworthy that we recognize the building is large overall, but I think everyone on the call can appreciate just how tight that floor plan is on the ground floor that Sandy was presenting earlier, and particularly when Lindsay was putting it in the site condition. So we're putting a lot of stuff in a really slim space, and it's kind of forcing us to push some things out, like this stair, and allow us then to step back the full facade and let that stand proud on that south facade.
So I'd like to talk about the street level, but I don't know, John, were you wanting to talk about?
No, go ahead,
Right.
Wendy. Go ahead.
Okay,
I
all
can
right.
talk about it later.
Okay. So we know that the crossings between the library and the AAA transit center have been a problem in the past. And I understand, I think from Jeff, that there's some work being done looking at that. Can you talk about, it's my sense that that corner is pretty abrupt at 5th and William, about any thought of bringing the entrance to that retail there at the corner, or somehow cutting that off, or providing an opportunity to try to draw pedestrians to that corner rather than going straight across in advance of the crosswalk in the intersection.
Yes. I'll jump in and then my colleagues can come right in. So there's a couple notable things here is, as you look at it in the model, it tends to make the ground plane look flat. Of course, it's pitching down from here over to here. And my team can correct me, but I think this is nominally a little north of 3 feet delta as it comes down. Yeah, thank you. And so as we do that, we're trying to find key locations along that facade where we can actually have entries for retail. I can tell you right now, we're contemplating 2 or 3 along the south facade here, because we can imagine independent retailers here, and 1 here at the corner, exactly to your point. We feel like this corner in itself is really important. This is a key corner, obviously, relationship to the library and the context around the bike pathway, and it's important. And so we're making that a kind of primary feature here, just as it is on the west side. But in this case, this could be more retail driven, whereas on the west side, that is going to be a resident lobby and entry.
Right. And the west side is a whole different character, but this corner is super important. And, you know, to the extent that you can try to pull people in there, and you'll still now, with the additional lane, you'll now have maybe three lanes of three pedestrian crossings along Division there.
Right.
Or 5th Avenue, excuse me, to try to get in. So it seems like that's a natural to try to draw people there at the corner. The other comment I have and question I have is the protected bikeways are different and new in the town. And it's really, you know, how do you see the retail frontage along that where most of the downtown has a parking lane, for instance, right next to the curb? You know, or is that going to be free space? Is it how are you going to treat that maybe differently than we might traditionally in other parts of the downtown?
Yeah.
I mean, Wendy, I can chime in just from a design perspective, but I want to, you know, maybe caveat my response as to, you know, we haven't done any market analysis on, you know, what the demand might be for those kind of spaces and the retailers. I do think, you know, we think it's important space. We think it's viable space from an interior perspective. And I also think it could be quite lovely space, even with you know, the protected cycle track adjacent to it. I think the way that the standard has started to address William Street, turning the corner on Main, just down the street, and you know, we'll see how those spaces start to fill out. And you know, retail is in a different place than it's been in the past, and will continue to shift and change. But we do see a lot of potential for space there to blur inside and outside boundaries, to kind of continue the activity down William, adjacent to the library, and frankly, you know, we're a couple blocks from Main Street too, right? So I think we're thinking about the scale of that space from a pedestrian standpoint on the curb, similarly to how we would if there were a traffic, you know, a parking lane there, and I think from a kind of continuation of the streetscape that's already been started.
Yeah, I think the thing that puzzles me is with the parking lane, it's pretty static in terms of, as a pedestrian, you expect those vehicles not to be moving in the parking lane. And with the cycle track, with bicycles going there, are people going to be like just casually hanging out and, you know, using that space in front of stores? I don't know. It's an interesting question that, you know, whether you put up some type of not barrier, but some type of indication that that's something that they don't want to step into as they're using the sidewalk.
From a landscape perspective, we do get it that, and I mean, the nice thing about not having cars in front of your site is you don't have to worry about car doors opening up. So we have curbed planters instead of tree grates, which is, I think, a great asset. And we can add in perennials and other landscaping there. And then we also have quite a large amount of bike hoops lining that street. So there really isn't much room for pedestrians to move from the sidewalk into the bike lane. I mean, they can if they want, but it wouldn't be a natural movement necessarily, other than, you know, hopping out of the bike lane probably and parking your bike. But I don't think people will just be like walking into the bike lane for any reason.
Great. And just one last personal observation. I love it when there's glass and lots of transparency at the street level, but I've noticed there have been some retailers that have come in and then put their equipment and blocking and sales, whatever, and it looks really horrible. So hopefully there'll be enough flexibility in your design to, you know, put some, opaque components there, not have it all glass along that retail frontage.
Thanks, Mandy.
John, you've got your hand up. You've been very patient.
That's quite all right. I might divert it to public art. Gary, did you have a thought you wanted to bring into the conversation?
No, not me.
Okay. Well, first of all, I absolutely love the project. We've been trying to increase workforce housing for a long time. I've been in town for just 20 years. I'm a new kid, but all the time I've been here, that has been a conversation. So applause to Jennifer and her team for doing this. This is awesome. I'm not an architect, but I'm looking at this and the massing seems great. I see it as two towers only in this respect. My understanding and reading the material that it has two entrances and two separate lobbies. So the communities in those particular areas are coming into that structure in two different places. And so I can see how from the ground you can see it as two towers, but looking at it, it doesn't really look necessarily like two towers, but I think that the massing of it is just awesome. I don't know whether the example of the precast concrete will continue, but I love that. And it gives a very elegant feel to it. And I mean, I think the most important thing is that, 95 low-income people will have a place to live here in Ann Arbor. And I think the mixed use is going to add an additional 40. So we're talking about 130 folks, and that is huge. And I'm so pleased that Jennifer has found a way of threading this needle, that it still is a part of public housing, but it also is market rate and run by another entity. So kudos to that. And it looks great from what I'm seeing. I want to speak to two other issues, drill into it. Is one, the carbon neutrality goals for the city and the environmental sustainability, and the trauma-informed design, which I think that Jennifer really wants to have impacted in that whole design process. And I think it gets to some of the art, but it'll be a bit of a circuitous route. The solar panels, I think the staff has already mentioned that the design you might want to include solar panels, and I would agree with that. And in fact, I think what's on the screen now is the third floor, and that area has a kind of a pergola that I think you could really do some wonderful designs of solar panels on top of that pergola. And as far as that vertical strip going up, that would be awesome. To really incorporate solar panels vertically. And I know that the folks that are installing through the Solarize program for the city want to do that. And so this would be excellent that that this Housing Commission project sort of demonstrates that it really is workable. And that I know there was some concern by staff, and to have the inserts, I guess on the west side it's symmetrical, on the east side it's not exactly symmetrical, and would like to see a drawing of it. And I tend to agree. And I just wouldn't stop at that one huge vertical. I would think about also the verticals that are within those precast. So any way you can, and to me, it would be a creative process. It would be a work of art using solar panels. You don't have to just stick the things on and have it one big mass. So it could be a wonderful design with photovoltaic panels. And the other part is the live roofs. I don't know whether Dan, that you have some flat sort of roofs, and I don't know whether you're planning that to be live or not. But I would encourage you to consider it, and also as an option. And maybe, I mean, if we really want to get creative, and I know you're trying to sort through just. Let's get through the zoning issues, but combine kind of a vertical vegetation up that huge vertical, along with photovoltaic. It could really be a stunning, and I do believe that you do have kind of some vertical vegetation on that little deck outside, and I would encourage the green roofs, and this vertical gardening to sort of kind of fold into micro gardens. That what I love, what calms me, I'm 76, and we have some water dripping outside in our yard, just literally, not a gushing waterfall, literally dripping water. Just, I think, can lower my blood pressure 20 points. So using water, using plants, and activating a kind of a garden feel to that, I think would be absolutely awesome. But let me also get to art making. I think that, art making is a healing, uplifting act. I think Jennifer knows this. And so I don't know what your plans are, but I'm sure that Jennifer recognizes that some of these common spaces could entail art making as well as art display. I've had conversations with the AAATA folks, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, about using the inside of the bus advertising for displays. And so you're right next to it. To me, I would love that you would get on the outside of those buses. They're not that expensive, and to really connect, particularly what they are looking for is civic motivating artwork. So if the message is that like Nancy Margolis has embracing our differences, and it's really been accepted, by the town. And so if kind of the artwork could get into that, and that might be a very good selling point when you start getting into those sort of details, is that the residents here could make art as a trauma-informed design, display it within their building, and then also get it on the buses. So in any event, maybe we're getting too far in the weeds, and probably I usually do. So my wife, if she's not here, she would give me the hook. but in any event, Jennifer, this is awesome. I'm so excited. And I think Wendy is excited that the thing is just happening. I mean, you know, that I think 20 years ago, this was just starting. I mean, we were at the Y. I mean, we had a membership in the Y, and that, you know, and it wasn't the nicest workout room, I must admit, but or the pool, but it was. And then that whole saga of it coming down to this day. So very good story. Thanks, Jennifer. Thanks, team.
Yeah, you're welcome. And we think there's lots of exciting possibilities to incorporate art into this, inside and out. Like when someone's like, hey, I live in that building where the is, the thing, you know, that makes it exciting, not just that brick building that's over there. So yeah, we're excited about that.
Yeah, thank you.
And if the Art Commission can help in any way, so we're available if it helps.
Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, any other comments? Dick?
Yeah, Dan, could you switch back to that street view looking west that we were looking at before?
Right here?
Yeah, thank you. I always try to tie it back to our guidelines, which I'm the nerd in the group that does that, I guess. But one of the guidelines that Jeff actually cited in the staff report was that the entries be something special. I think it's C2. And the entry to the East Tower, I agree with Wendy, would really be better more toward the corner than in its current location that is adjacent to the service lane. I just think there's a missed opportunity there. And then another guideline that Jeff cited in his comments was surface texture, color, and detail. And I hate to disagree with John, but I don't think the East Tower is there yet. The narrative talks about exciting things, but they're just not there yet. And I think it lacks detail and color and interest. And so I think there's a lot more work to be done on the East Tower. It's a large wall on our fringe neighborhood to the south, and it should just be more interesting to look at than it currently is, I think. So there's opportunity there. We've got the people in place to do it, and I know you can, and just going to assume you just haven't gotten there yet. But I'd encourage you to move in that direction.
Thank you. Is that Jeff? Yeah.
Yep. Thanks. I just wanted to share a few thoughts if no one else had anything to say. I just had a few thoughts. One was we don't really know what the direction of retail will be downtown. Currently, it's pretty soft. Maybe some might say extremely soft. This is a tough block. This is not Main Street or Liberty or Washington or Ashley or State. It's a tough block in terms of drawing people here for a retail experience or a restaurant experience. So my suggestion was to consider designing the second floor of the East Tower to accommodate the potential for future residential uses. That way, you know, years from now, if retail just is not working on the ground floor, the owner may want to shift the community rooms and the fitness center or bathrooms down to the first floor, and then capture that second floor for more residential uses. So I would encourage you to consider that in terms of designing utilities and that sort of thing. So that's one comment that I had. Someone mentioned the comment that I had about solar on the roof, so I just want to reiterate that. Thank you. Maybe that was John. And then lastly, I wanted to concur with Dick with his thoughts on the East Tower. I actually really love how the West Tower turned out. I think it's really lovely. I think that it feels warmer to me, and I like the symmetry of the brick panels. I think the East Tower feels cooler to me, and I'd be interested to see if the East Tower could show different colors of the brick and maybe different placements for the brick panels. I sure like that salmon colored terracotta color that you have on the West Tower. But it gets it's a little less inspiring to me on the East Tower, and that's just personal preference.
Mhm.
And that's all I had. And Jeff, whenever you'd like me to summarize the comments that I've heard, I'd be happy to do that.
Well, yeah. So are there any other comments from other board members? What point should we do the public comment part, Jeff?
I think that you could do the public comment now.
Okay.
I'm happy to summarize at the very end.
All right. That sounds good. So I need to find my cheat sheet. Darn it. I got so many screens open right now, I can't see straight.
And would you like me to stop sharing or continue?
I think you can leave it up there.
Okay. Okay.
Well, I had my narrative here somewhere. Got it. Okay, to speak during the public comment phase, which is now, please call 877-852-5247 or 888-788-0099 and enter meeting ID 974-6174-9412. And I guess we can give that a minute or so to see if we get any response. Courtney, do those calls come into you?
They do, and I don't see anyone raising their hand right now.
Okay. Then Jeff, why don't you go ahead and summarize what you heard?
Great. And after the summary of items I've heard, if I've missed anything, please let me know. You can let me know at this meeting now, or you can email me, call me, whatever. I'm going to try to just generally summarize what the main issues were that I heard. I heard questions, maybe some concerns about air quality related to the buses and in the loading areas for AATA. We heard comments about this being two separate buildings when it sort of has a feel of one building, maybe with two separate sections. We heard questions about rain screens and windows and whether these would be floor to ceiling windows. We had questions about the loading areas and access to the north side. We had some opinions expressed about glazing. There was a suggestion to reconsider the stair tower and maybe adding a glass element to the stair tower. There was a question about whether the developer would be obligated to use this design or whatever design gets approved at the site plan stage. We did have some discussion about pedestrian crossings on South Fifth. Currently, we have a lot of crossings taking place between Blake and the library, and those are mid-block crossings, which are not particularly safe. And so there was a suggestion to rethink the orientation of access points to the building to try to encourage more people to cross at the corner. We heard a comment about the protected bike lanes, sort of replacing on-street parking, and what that might mean from a retail experience and a pedestrian experience. You know, are there ways to create delineations so pedestrians don't wander into bike lanes? So we had comments about that. We had some comments about the facade materials. We heard comments about the amount of glass and transparency on the first floor, and that some retailers downtown will bring equipment and locate them right up to the glazing, which is unsightly. And are there ways that we can maybe build in some wall elements to discourage that? We heard about the massing. John in particular indicated that he really liked the massing, thought it looked great, was interested in issues related to carbon neutrality goals, as well as trauma-informed design. John did mention solar panels and potential for solar panels, including possibly on some of the patio spaces and the pergolas of the patio spaces, possibly some vertical solar. John also mentioned live roofs or living roofs with vegetation, possibly vegetation growing up or down some of the walls. John also talked about civic motivating art that, you know, might convey a message, and he used an example of embracing our differences as a potential theme. Trauma-informed design could be infused into the building as well as on buses by residents who live at 350 South Fifth. Dick indicated that he agreed with Wendy that it might be good to rethink the main access point for the East Tower to try to encourage people at the corner. He thought that corner provided a unique opportunity as a focal point, and that Dick also felt that the East Tower could use a little rethinking in terms of surface texture, color, detail, and so those are some of the main comments that I heard. Have I missed anybody's comment? This would be a good time for me to add it.
I think early on when you mentioned rain screens, we could also include light shelves and shading devices.
Yeah, light shelves. Got it. Okay, anything else? Did I miss any misspeak? Missing anything? Okay.
I think you did a pretty thorough job, Jeff.
Okay.
Captured it.
Thanks, Jeff. I will summarize this in writing, and I'll email that to everyone. So you'll have a second shot at making modifications to it. So you should see that within the next week or so.
Great. Sounds great. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you to the design team for this project. Good presentation. And I guess the only thing that I would interject at this point is when the time comes that a developer is identified, that if significant changes are contemplated with the project, I expect that this board will see it again.
Thank you.
Got it.
Thank you for your time.
Great. Thank you all.
Thank you.
So we move on to unfinished business. What are we supposed to do with this calendar? Is this something that we
This is the 2023 calendar that is being presented. And you have an opportunity to either modify it or to approve it. We think you should approve it without discussion.
I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Support.
Moved by Wendy and supported by Gary. Any further comments, discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Raise your
Aye.
hand. Opposed, same sign. All right, looks like that's our calendar for next year.
Great.
I do want to make a comment and thanking everybody that was able to make it today, and a special thanks to those who had other plans and rearranged them in order to make certain that we had a quorum for today. So thanks very much for that. Do we have any communications?
We don't have any communications.
Okay. And anybody hanging on the line, Courtney?
No, there don't appear to be any callers at this time.
If there's no further business, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Gary, seconded by Bill. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign.
Have good holidays, everybody.
Yeah, Merry
Yeah.
Christmas, everybody, and hopefully we'll have something to look at in 2023. See you next year.
Great.
Sounds
Bye,
great.
everyone.
Merry
Bye.
Christmas.
Aye.
Bye now.